Hello, everyone. Welcome to Risk Fluence, the podcast where we dive deep into the evolving world of risk and resilience. In today's episode, we'll be exploring a space that often sits at the crossroads of technology and enterprise risk. If you're wondering what it is nothing but IT infrastructure and ITIL driven operations. We all know ITIL helps keep services stable, predictable, and customer focused. But beneath that, stability is actually a challenge. Service outages, change management failures, and most importantly, growing convergence with cybersecurity. To unpack most of these risks, we are joined by a wonderful guest, Katrina McDermott, an entrepreneur, award winning author, and one of the world's leading IT service management experts. Known for her pioneering integration of human centered design into IT frameworks, she has transformed how organizations view the role of technology, placing people at the heart of IT. An ITIL master, former global ambassador, and contributing author to ITIL 4 publications, Katrina is an international recognized leader, speaker, consultant, and educator who continues to inspire the global IT service management community through her humanizing IT books, podcasts, and boot camps. I'll be posting her LinkedIn profile after this podcast. Feel free to check out and get more inspired about her work. Katrina, it's wonderful to have you on this podcast. Thank you for accepting the invite. Let's get started. Katrina, I want to just love to hear your perspective on some of the big shifts that are happening in IT infrastructure and ITL based operations in today's evolving digital world.
I think there's a lot of shifts, but the top two would be there's a lot more focus on experience in
Okay.
IT service management. And I don't entirely 100% agree that IT is responsible for creating a great experience,
Right.
which we can discuss. And I think the other shift is obviously there's a lot more frameworks than there was 20 years ago. And so where IT organizations traditionally followed ITIL, well, now that there's lots to choose from, actually. So I think they're the main two, the experience and the variety of frameworks that organizations can choose to run their IT departments.
Makes sense. So I think when it comes to the frameworks, how do you see the ITL framework that is shaping the industry and maybe accommodating the today's shifts? With regards to it could be cyber, it could be AI, and how is it different from what it has been in the past?
Yeah, I mean, I often say we need to be very careful about what we choose.
Yeah.
And what I mean by that is frameworks were designed for a purpose.
Right.
And frameworks like ITIL had a purpose, and that was
Got
to ensure that IT departments were run efficiently and cost effectively, and obviously to keep IT infrastructure available, secure, as you would know, and
Yes.
reliable. That was ITIL's role. And I often
Right.
say, that's it, full stop. That was its role.
Right.
And its role was never about designing for experience.
Right.
And it has become, like a lot of other frameworks, a little confused. And I often say it's like perhaps asking a cybersecurity expert
Yeah.
to run a major incident on a network that's got nothing to do with cybersecurity. So we need to be mindful of where we're putting the right skills and also training the right skills to the right people.
Got
Perhaps
it. Okay.
a better way of saying it, sorry to interrupt, is that you wouldn't ask a photographer to paint a picture because that's not their skill. The photographer's good at taking pictures. They're not good at painting a portrait. And so this is what I'm saying. Not saying they can't, but it's different skills.
Exactly. I mean, they're not expert in painting a photo rather than capturing a photo. That's
Correct.
absolutely right. I think the purpose matters more. That's a good call, Katrina. So as the purpose goes with this podcast, I wanted to just wear a hat of a beginner or probably a fresher who is getting into the IT service management. Think about me. Think of me as like approaching you as that as a student who just passed out of an internship and then getting into a company. What are some of those at least two, three things that they should be equipped to get into the service management? What should they be excited about, maybe?
Well, I'd probably say choose a different career.
Okay.
I'm
And why do you
kidding.
say that?
Because, I mean, make no mistake, it's very
Uh,
hard and challenging to work in IT service management, and I say that uh, with jest, but also in all seriousness, is that a lot of the time we don't get the recognition
right.
that we we should get. And again, I often say if it wasn't for IT and IT service management, companies wouldn't run. It's as
Hmm.
simple as that. But very rarely do we get thanks for that. And most often we get the opposite. We get told that we're not efficient, we're too expensive, we've got to do a restructure to reduce headcount. And as I said, it's very often I hear that, wow, IT is
Right.
fantastic. But having said that, look, IT has absolutely given me a wonderful career. Um,
Yeah.
as I said, with its challenges, and and I think today's a really exciting time to enter IT service management, especially as we all know with AI, the landscape will change,
Hmm.
and I think people saying that it won't change our jobs. I don't think that's a correct statement. I think it absolutely will change our jobs. Um,
Right.
and so it's a really great time to get into IT service management. And I guess what a lot of people are saying is that I think AI will enable us to do it a lot
Yeah.
better. Yeah. Mm.
Right. So, when you think me as a fresher, that what tools that I can probably refer, or what framework that I can refer, or even probably what technologies that I should be
Mhm.
knowing of to get into
Mhm.
this domain.
Yeah. I would absolutely, of course, I would say that you should start with ITIL. That always
Yep.
gives an IT professional really great grounding on
Hmm.
understanding what IT service management is, the different roles, how IT works, essentially. So,
Right.
but then, of course, I'm going to say, as well as doing our course, which
Yep.
is humanizing IT, um,
Right.
which I might, if I may, give you a bit of an overview of what our
Yeah.
course is.
I was about to, get
Mm.
to that point as such. So, maybe can I request you to go over what does this humanizing IT is all about, and how different is it from, if ever exists, any other similar frameworks as such, right? So maybe you can give us some overview about this humanizing IT.
Fantastic. I will, and thank you for the opportunity. Uh,
Yep.
I like to start with that. As I've said, I've worked in IT all of my career, and we all know frameworks like ITIL, Agile, DevOps, NIST, etc. Um, but I had never heard of a framework called human-centered design. And
Right.
human-centered design is very big. It's a very big framework that most people
Hmm.
in IT have never heard about. And vice versa, most people that work in design have never heard of ITIL or Agile or NIST. But I started studying human centered design, and I just had this moment of like, why don't we bring this framework into IT? Because what human centered design is, it's a framework that it's an innovative approach to problem solving based on people's needs. And that's a very high level um, description. But basically, companies, big companies and not so big companies, use human centered design to understand their customers
Hmm.
because they want to obviously keep customers, they want loyalty, they want them to buy their products. So they spend a lot of time understanding customers and building products and services around their customers. And
Right.
we say in IT that we want to look after our users, but how do we do that? And there is no framework to do that.
Right.
So what Humanizing IT does, it is designed for IT service management, because human-centered design is typically for customers, not
Mm-hmm.
internal users. So this is specifically for IT, where we teach
Got
IT
it.
professionals these wonderful tools and techniques of how to actually design your processes and your services based on the user needs, not based on what we think is good or what we
Mm-hmm.
think we know about the users. We
Got it.
part of humanizing IT is really a lot of techniques of understanding users. And quite often I hear we do talk to users or we do understand our users. Well, I challenge that, because just talking to
Mm-hmm.
users is not really understanding their needs. And as I said, we teach lots of tools and techniques that you can apply directly into your work, and for cybersecurity, for any framework, in fact. Yeah.
Got it. So I understand it in a way, if I have to put it in a shorter summary, is that this humanizing IT would complement on top of the existing, frameworks, example, ITIL or any other frameworks, so that it could bring in a human touch to the what actually is already there and more of an objective based frameworks there.
That is wonderfully summarized.
Yep.
Yes.
Thanks, Katrina. Okay. So, this was really helpful for our audience to know about, hey, want to actually get into the ITIL or service management, what to some of those resources that I can definitely refer to it, right? Now, slightly shifting to the emerging trends as such, right? Now, in your experience, I'm sure that you would have seen a lot of blind spots there. Now, coming to the thinking as a risk professional, what are those risks that I know would could have caused a blind spot, but then a risk professional should be really be aware about it from an IT service management standpoint?
I think a lot of IT organizations get a new initiative or a new project or a new restructure. And again, with all the right intentions,
Right.
they can see the outcome that they want to achieve. Now, very
Hmm.
rarely do I see those outcomes achieved. And I think the blind spot is that a lot of IT leaders and IT professionals start at the wrong place. Um,
Hmm.
they start with what they know or what they've done before or what best practice says. And I quite often will challenge that. In the same breath, they'll say that they're innovators and they want to transform. And then I will respond that you're not innovating or transforming if you're doing what you know. And to me, that's the blind spot.
Makes
And
sense. Yeah.
yeah, if you want to innovate, and we teach this as part of our training, is that you start from zero assumptions. You
Yep.
welcome any idea. There's no judgment. And it's
Right.
amazing that when you do that, uh, how you can change your path to what you initially. And I find that that rarely happens in IT service management. I was very guilty of that myself. Um,
Hmm.
I would start a project and either picked up the ITIL book or another book, and off I went. I never challenged my beliefs or the status quo.
Got it. No, that's a good to know. I want to actually share 2 cents from what I have been seeing as a blind spot is usually is that people driven usually they depend a lot more on the frameworks itself versus that they actually looking at their own systems that hey, there is something different from what framework suggests and we need to act differently versus what's there in the framework. And I think the risk professionals should be very aware about of both the things of what framework suggests and what's there in the on the ground, and how they are actually still mitigating the risk by following the framework, because sometimes the on ground team would completely blind about, hey, this framework doesn't tell us this, so we're not supposed to do this, so it's not required as such. But that's a good insight. I think pretty much summarizes about what those blind spots are, or should probably be those professionals be looking at. Right? Okay, so I think we want to actually talk about some of the operational risks and how it can be more resilient enough by design itself, right? Again, I want to actually tone down to the service outages itself. Because these service outages will often also hit into the reputation of a company, as and it could be probably even financial fines also, right? Now, based on your experience or what you have seen in the past as an ITL expert, how can these ITL designs or a service design and continuity planning could help companies to be very sure about that? Hey, if something wrong happens, we are good with making sure that we come back to the a normal state as easy as possible, as soon as possible, because it will have an impact on their reputation.
That's right. And then, as I said, that we are not saying throw governance and all the good things that we know in IT service management away, but quite
Right.
often, when there is a major outage, it was because there was a change. And so
Right.
the change management or change enablement process gets the blame, for want of a better word. And what we would do in that situation is actually say it's probably not the process that it's fault. It's everything around that's at fault. And I can guarantee you and I really don't like the cause as human error. Sometimes I've seen that in
Mm-hmm.
organizations. I don't like that at all. I think that you've got to look at why the process isn't working. It's not the
Mm-hmm.
process. It might be because the way the contracts are written. It might be
Right.
because, I can give an example where when we do DR testing but because of contractual obligations or non-obligations, the DR is
Right.
not properly tested yearly. It's only tested a little bit, and it's all these complexities that come to cause that problem happening in
Mm-hmm.
this. So it's never just one thing. And as I said, I always question. It's so many things that could have been prevented along the way, and unfortunately, we have to wait for something bad or catastrophic, heaven forbid, to happen before things get rectified. And I think
Right.
that's a lot of the pattern in IT, that um, because we have constraints called money and people, and I guess people really understanding what IT service management is, to be quite frank. It's not
Right.
until something bad happens
Right.
does it get addressed. And that
Correct.
frustrates me. Um, and that's about risk, isn't it? Risk acceptance. Maybe some organizations do know it and they accept that risk. Um,
Right.
yeah. Mm.
Yeah, and I think in my past, I've seen companies accept the risk, which they don't even have an idea about what's the impact going to be of this outage as
Mm.
such, and it's going to be like a quick fix that hey, we want to actually just accept this risk and then probably move on, and then we'll
Move
figure
on.
out how to get this done. The other example that I've seen is that these IT service management have been outsourced to a third party where they would have not done a proper due diligence about their own capability or capacity to ensure contain these service outages, and they do not have a proper contractual clauses to protect them from any of the legal compliance issues. So when these outages happens, I quite often see that there is a lot of blame game about that. Hey, this was not us, this was theirs.
Yeah.
We not kind of, but at the end of the day, customer is kind of be feeling very frustrated about the outages itself, where it could be airline, it could be banking, it could be anything. That's the sad part about these inefficient decisions that gets into these risks at all. But that's a good call out, Katrina. I really appreciate about calling out that what they shouldn't be doing and what they likely should be doing also, right? And again, it puts a more emphasis on some of the key processes like change management, incident management, and all of that. Now, I see a lot of times an untested change gets into the prod and creates a havoc itself. And probably it could create a lot more issues than what is anticipated as such. So, what are some of those maybe two or three things that you think that you should, the company should be looking at when it comes to like some of these key processes, change management or incident management processes?
I think that change management is one of those processes or practices that don't get enough love.
Yeah.
It's in our training, we actually have a character called Chuck, who's the change
Right.
manager. And, I think if we personify a lot of people in IT service management, it's hard for them to have a voice as
Right.
much as they try, because it's a chain of events. I will say that word that I said at the Osaka conference where we met is that, how many companies have a CMDB that they can rely on? And the answer is
Yeah.
very, very, very few. So that's when
Right.
I say it's not the change management process fault. It's a lot of the things are
Right.
before that. And this is what I mean, that management are willing to prepare or accept that risk of not having a CMDB. But when
Mm-hmm.
you do that, this
Yeah.
is the consequence. And I find a lot of IT professionals have become a little bit, I won't say, how can I express this? Not given up. But yeah, a lot of IT professionals, and I was one of them, that you've tried so hard to say
Right.
this is not going to work, and I've raised it, and then you just kind of get to the stage of giving up. And and that's unfortunate, because that's not what we want. We want people to feel empowered and that they have a voice.
I know.
And it's hard, and sometimes I don't know how to answer that when, as I said, if companies aren't going to invest in what's really required from an IT service management point of view. I often say, don't invest in a new tool, because that's
Mm-hmm.
not going to necessarily invest in improving those foundational processes first,
Right.
and then get the tool.
Got it. So I think the message that I'm going to take it that no, do not over depend on the tool, but actually go back to your processes, design itself, evaluate whether it is catering to the purpose and objective and it kind of mitigating the risk, and then come back to the tools to see whether how it complements to your overall process as such.
Correct. Yeah.
Yeah, makes sense. Thanks, Katrina. So the next one I know I am more curious to understand in today's evolving world where we have cybersecurity and ITSM are converging more than ever because I see a lot of risk are interrelated, where cyber professionals are relying on IT service management professional, and it's a vice versa also. And at some point, both of them should have a reasonable amount of knowledge about the both the areas. Of course, their own expertise in their own areas, plus the reasonable amount of knowledge in the other area. How do you see this shift as kind of complementing, or does it disturb the rhythm of how each of the processes that it is going as such?
Yeah. No, that's a really good point, because I remember working in IT, and I used to write contracts as part of it. And in those days, security didn't really enter my head.
Right.
You think about all the integrations that we have with service providers, and now I've learned to ask things about the security, about who owns the data,
Uh-huh.
because service providers have got access to a lot of data, so really tightening that up, and I think that's so important today, especially that, like humanizing IT, that these frameworks really start integrating with each other, because a lot of people in IT are trained in ITIL, and in my day, risk cybersecurity wasn't really taught. It was kind of mentioned. It's a practice
Mhm.
now, but and so I really love today that it is, and who knows, it might overtake traditional IT service management because of the reliance that we have on
Right.
security today. It, and you're so right. In my day, cybersecurity was something new, to be honest. It was more about data security and
Right.
the like. Yeah.
And I completely agree with the fact that what it was practiced in the past, I think I am happy with a lot of companies now, emphasizing on significance of people having a knowledge about both the areas there so that they know what that they're gonna develop a code and where it's gonna impact, which part of the area within their own companies. I think I'm glad that they are integrating the processes so that they are evolving together and not just in silos. So that hey, that's not my job. I know it's
Yeah.
your job, sort of a
But
thing,
but
right?
it would be nice, and I do see it, but I don't think enough. Rather than
Yeah,
integrating the processes,
right,
integrating the people, because
correct,
a lot of the time the risk and compliance and cyber sit in a different area
right.
to IT service management. And so, as I said, integrate the people and the culture, because I think it is a different type of a culture that exists within a risk management team.
Correct. I think that brings me to a very unique question in terms of more of a sense of belonging to all of these processes itself. Now, when you actually look at people's that hey, why should I care about this? And then if they actually really think about collectively, I think that people first approach towards these processes would gonna change the game in a different way versus just hey, I think I just want to do it because someone has said that and I need to do it. So I think that whole thought process would definitely change if companies probably try to look at more of a people-centered approach to these processes versus just an objective-driven a process approach.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So again, when it comes to ITIL, I remember my initial days of IT service management, where some of the processes that we were looking at it, and one of the company that I worked revolves around SLAs. So that's like a almost a partner with the ITIL processor or IT service management processes. Any outages happens, hey, it's a P1 secure severity, it's a P2 severity. What's the SLA? What's the turnaround time and all of that? So people get more obsessed about these metrics and of course with the reasoning around it.
Mm.
Now, I wanted to understand that when it comes to looking at risks around these SLAs or risk indicators as such, how can these two worlds of ITL with the SLAs and the performance metrics, which is to a more of a human related part of it, can come together and probably be a more of an ideal on a point where they meet and hey, this SLA is not too much or not too low, which is kind of impacting the way people respond to it. Sometimes they need time to respond. So how do you see that these two worlds come together and be a more ideal approach?
Mm. Yeah, I mean, I could answer this in two ways. I might go the second way, actually. But firstly, service level agreements were traditionally written around the technology that
Right?
is available, as we said, secure and reliable, um, and how long it took to restore and recover services, etc. So that's service level agreements as we know it. And then I think what you're alluding to is that even though the services are restored, the customers are still unhappy.
Hmm.
Um, and I quite often give an example of when I worked for Qantas, Qantas Airlines, that they had an outage at the airport, or sorry, a priority one incident, not an outage, where the bag tags were printing the wrong destination.
Got it.
Now, that caused, as you could imagine, very chaos at the airport for airline
I know.
operations staff and for customers and passengers. However, the SLA from that supplier the following month was green. And why was it green? Because the system was available and
Okay.
it was printing response times, all that. So all the SLAs were met, but
Hmm.
the experience was very poor.
Right.
And that's a good example of how, and I was one of them, designed service level agreements based on technology, not based on how people react and how operationally they were impacted, etc.
Right.
And that brings me to a concept that a colleague in our industry, I'm not sure if you've heard of him, called Rob England,
Hmm.
has written a book called, oh my gosh, I've had a blank. standard plus case. Standard plus
Sure.
case.
Right.
And I love it. And I think it's one of those, we should be doing this anyway. And what the premise is that when we write service level agreements, we say that for a priority 1 incident, it has to be recovered in an hour or 2 hours. If it's a priority 2, we say 4 hours. And what Rob says is that how can you possibly know something is going to take that long to fix? And I like to give an analogy in that if we get picked up for speeding, we're driving and we're speeding, we get given a ticket and we know the process. We know that process. But it's like if someone gets charged with, bear with me, a very serious crime, like a robbery, we don't know how long that's going to take to solve. And so you're asking service providers to commit to something that they possibly cannot foresee. And so what happens is they sign up for this and knowing that and then I've been involved, that you probably won't. So it's kind of what I'm saying, it's kind of ludicrous. And I agree. So for those incidents that we don't know how long they're going to take, we call it a case.
Right.
And we treat it very differently. And we still have SLAs on it. We're not saying don't worry about it, but it's a different approach versus if it's an incident, even a P1 that's happened before, it's standard. We know how to fix it and we will guarantee an hour. And I really, as I said, I really love that approach to looking at how to do SLAs very differently because you're asking someone to promise something that they can't.
Right.
Yeah.
Correct. Right. And I can also probably relate to some of the key sectors like, financial sectors or aviation sectors. Now, when these incidents happen in any form, like, it could be delay on flight or it could be a delay in transaction, the servers are down and all of that. I think, they will have their own reasoning in terms of why these SLA even exist or probably why they are answerable to this. But having said that, I have like two approaches to look into those SLAs that could possibly be meeting a performance metric which is acceptable to anyone on the other end who's resolving those incidents. Is that one approach is that make it more realistic that just because that any incident is P1, you can't relatively say just 1 hour that you have to probably resolve all of them. Yes, it's needed, but do we have a capacity to do that? If not, maybe you should try and find a solution that yes, we need a 1 hour, but I think we don't have it, so we'll have to find something else instead of putting someone who can't resolve in 1 hour. So that will probably put the people experience to resolve those incidents in a poor state there. The other one is that design a process in such a way that you will have as less incidents as possible, so that you don't have to go back do a firefighting after an incident happens as such, so that at least you can sleep peacefully that hey, I have for some systems working in my background if some incident happens, and then I can jump in because it's gonna be have like a defensing me. I think in security world they call like a defense in depth, mostly that because that if you actually break one door, you will have multiple doors to break in to get into steal a crown there from that. So no, that's a good thought, Katrina. Thanks a lot. Now, when we look at these risk indicators as such, right? What are some of those human-centered risk indicators that you can think of in this evolving or ever-changing IT service management to monitor these IT service outages or probably even into getting into the framework? Can you shed some light on some risk indicators itself?
I guess it's what you were saying earlier, that if you don't design processes or recovery strategy or tactics with people at the heart of it,
right,
you're setting yourself up to fail in the beginning.
right.
And I mean, if I sort of go back to quite a simple example, if you, and this is where all the nice processes should come together, called IT service management. If we have a major incident or priority 1 incident, I've seen this on more than one occasion. It's because the license has expired on some server somewhere, and this is where the processes aren't working or orchestrating together nicely, and so that risk factor about making people feel enabled in the whole
Right.
environment is really, really important. And it's not just, as I said, I mean, I see this quite often, is that IT professionals will write a process
Right.
and then that they're done. That's it. And
Got it.
thinking that that's the process. Now, that is not the process. I say that's words on a page.
Right.
So I say to process owners or practice owners, have you ever watched and asked a user or a colleague to walk
Hmm.
through your process? And the answer is invariably no. And even knowledge management, as we know, can help educate
Hmm.
and therefore mitigate risk. You're educating users about cybersecurity and safety and risk,
Right.
but those knowledge articles are written so poorly. And we get frustrated because users aren't reading the knowledge articles. We've given them emails. We've got posters everywhere. We've left things on desk, about the
I
importance of
know.
cybersecurity. But have we ever asked a user, does this make
Hmm.
sense to you? Will you read this? How can we better portray this? And again, we're the ones putting this up there. And I know a lot of organizations employ organizational change managers, et cetera, et cetera. But
Right.
I'm talking about um, the real nuts and bolts of our processes. Have you ever watched a user try and log a cybersecurity incident? I mean, how do
Right.
they do it? And if I just say normal incident, I ask, what's the telephone? If users want to ring the service desk versus logging a ticket,
Hmm.
what's the menu options on that telephone that they ring? And I guarantee you they're confusing. Um, and then if they try and log an incident by the portal, it's probably very hard as well. And we hear this all the time. It's so hard to log a ticket, we give up. And so this is where the human-centered design and humanizing IT works with all of the processes to make them work, not just a piece of paper. There's a big
I
difference.
know.
Mm.
Got it. No, that totally makes sense. I think I like the part about that human touch to these risk indicators. That it's very important for us to be emphasized on giving that human touch versus just going with the flow of what it should be done. Because
Mm.
sometimes that you never know that you have to take a step back and try to understand what's the real problem. And if you really don't understand the problem, you can't find a solution
Mm.
to get
That's
to
right.
that point.
Mm. Yeah.
All right. I think I want to just touch a few more things before we close out. I think I know I've seen this experience from people we talk is that quite often risk professionals are seen as like a blockers to the process itself. That hey, you're giving us a lot of recommendation where we cannot operationalize things. It's not possible. But again, the risk professionals giving in a more of recommendation to remediate and probably mitigate that quite occurring again and again as such. How do you see that a human-centered approach can probably bridge the gap of what the risk professionals are giving their expertise in the form of a recommendation and how the ITSM professionals should be looking at those recommendations and
Mm.
also probably coming together?
Mm. I think it goes back to what we say is that start with the user,
Right.
um, because again we create these mandates, for want of a better word, and
Right.
we we ask users, or mandate again, that our users have to follow it.
Right.
And I mean, I'd probably ask you a question, if I
Right.
may. If there was a security breach at an organization because a user didn't adhere to the policy, who's
Mhm.
where does the um, fault lay? Is it with the user or the process?
Yeah, I think it's a very interesting question. I mean, that goes back to the purpose itself. So now I do lean towards the user, where who's a victim of this breach as such, right? Because uh, of course, that user would completely blind about the processes at the back end, right? How it is kind of designed and what's that. For a user, it's just his own data or her own data as such. But if it's breached, the very first line is the company itself. But if I look at it from a risk professional standpoint, obviously, like I know I would probably make a company as a more accountable that, hey, this is actually impacting the your reputation outside, and this is also impacting the way people also respond to the risks inside the organizations also when these things happen. So it's, I think, I know the answer lies in the point where you stay and look at it. If I'm a user, I'm going to blame I know the company for not making it my data secure enough. But at the same time, from a risk professional standpoint, I look at the data, but I look at it one step ahead is also I look at the processes which is securing that data as such.
Yeah, and I think, and what I should have said also at the beginning of this podcast, like IT service management, we do a great job, and
Right.
very rarely do we get recognized. It's very similar to what you guys are doing. I mean, especially today, I think you guys are the unsung heroes in keeping organizations alive, essentially, because I think to your point, a lot of users do not understand the risks that every organization is probably managing cybersecurity risks as we
Right.
speak. Like, it's
Definitely. Yeah.
it's scary, and you guys are keeping us safe. And I think what would be really good is that to promote that as self, that you guys are the good guys, not the bad guys. And and I think that it's so much complex today, cybersecurity, than it was 10 years ago, because the bad guys are smart now, aren't they? They're getting smarter and smarter and smarter, and it's harder for the good guys to keep up. And that's where I think that if we acknowledge what you guys do, and I think, because as I said, I don't think a lot of users appreciate the complexity of keeping
Makes
organizations safe and
sense.
secure and protected. Yeah.
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 Thanks for those kind words about the risk professionals getting that really I know emphasizes the importance of risk professionals in any company it could be, right? So it's important that someone a second pair of eyes is always looking into the risk around these processes and add value through their risk insights to the stakeholders as such,
Yeah.
right? So now that brings me to a last question. I know we've left with another few minutes here. So if you could actually leave risk professionals with one key takeaway about navigating ITIL and IT infrastructure risks, that what it should be.
As observe how users are following your processes.
Okay.
That I honestly, I mean, we did humanizing IT training in a big hospital in Australia, and we had all the security guys in one class. And now this is
Got
a
it.
true story. And
Got
they
it.
said they get frustrated with the nurses
Mm-hmm.
because it's so easy to change passwords,
Got
but
it.
the top calls to the service desks are still password resets.
Right. I know.
and and so I got a nurse at lunchtime, and I asked, would you mind coming into my training and explaining your challenges? And it was probably one of the most powerful moments of my career to see these cybersecurity guys just sitting there and listening to the nurse, and how difficult she felt to use the app for MFA. And that was the
Right.
first time they'd ever spoken to one of their users. And it completely,
Mm.
so that's what I asked. Just put a human-centered lens on it. And as I said, we respect that you have to have process and governance, especially what you do, but make it more human-centered.
Definitely. All right. I think that brings to the end of this podcast, Katrina, and it was lovely talking to you and learning about a lot of insights that what you shared on this podcast. So I think I'm probably more learned person about IT service management. Today after having a conversation with you about what are some of those challenges, objectively, and more importantly, I think how can the human touch could possibly change the game altogether in terms of how people look at the IT service management. Thank you, and wonderful to have you on this definitely podcast, Roshar.
Thank you so much for the opportunity. Thank you.